Let's get started, eh? So welcome everybody. Today's presentation where we're going to unpack our learning so far about applied mental health. So this is a Work Safe, Work Well funded project with the goal to build psychologically safe and thriving workplaces. So we're piloting a new approach to learning by building leadership confidence and capability that transfers the knowledge from the classroom and online modules directly into teams and importantly into everyday work practices. Making applied mental health a systemic and sustainable approach to psychological safety. To start this session, I do want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name is Josh Marsden and I'm the technology lead of Applied Mental Health, and co-facilitating today is Tom Rouge. Tom is a senior consultant at APD Psychology and Consulting Services, the project lead and an expert in the systemic approach to building psychologically safe and thriving workplaces. So apart from being the subject matter expert today, Tom will also be running the slides from Melbourne, and I'm up here located in Brisbane. So if you see me winking or nodding at the screen, that's just for Tom to change the screen. So we're really excited today. It marks a really big milestone as we spent the last 15 months bringing the vision of applied mental health to life. Tom and I are really excited to share the journey with you on behalf of all the stakeholders that have been part of the project so far. We only have you for a short amount of time, so we do aim to be precise in our delivery. So with that, let's get stuck in. So this is an open session where we're going to share the learnings of applied mental health so far. So please ask questions along the way using the Q&A function or the chat. You can see the agenda up here on the screen, which Tim and I will work through over the next 45 minutes, and we'll use the last 15 minutes to answer any questions you might have. We will be moderating the chat, but we'll use the end to answer these questions. We'll also be using a tool called Menti. So what I encourage you all to do is get out your mobile phones now and go to menti.com, and you'll be asked to put in a code there, which will allow you to actually interact in the live environment. So menti.com. And then once you're there, and I'll put this in the chat, the code is 3770939. Tom's a step ahead of me.
No, sorry, Josh. Time lag between Brisbane and Melbourne.
No, I was just typing in the Menti, so all good. And then the other thing I just wanted to highlight is there is an incredibly short survey at the very end of the session. It will take you less than 2 minutes to complete, but I'd really love it if you could all take that time to do so. Overall for the session, we do want everybody to leave here with a clear understanding of what applied mental health is. If you get towards the end and are still not following, please let us know that and we'll try and reiterate that. And importantly, we will go into some of the things that you can do to improve psych safety in your workplace. So we encourage you all to take 1 or 2 of those things away and try and apply that directly into your work team. And with that said, let's kick off with our first Menti exercise. So again, jump onto menti.com and then use the code at the top of the screen. So it's 3770939, and then answer this question. How would you define a psychologically safe and mentally healthy workplace? So Menti is really cool in the sense that all your answers are anonymous, but it'll compile them here on the screen here, and we can just see what everybody's thinking. So to kick us off, we've got a place where people can be themselves and speak their mind. That sounds like a fantastic place to work. Be open. A supportive environment. One of trust. Trust is a very strong and great word for this session. What jumps out to you, Tom?
I think what I'm starting to see here is something we typically see around psychological safety need: openness, trust, supportive, place to speak, look and feel safe. And obviously a lot of that is indeed around, well, if I do speak up, does that have any negative consequences for me? So I can see there's a lot of comment about discussing issues with your team leader, be comfortable to voice opinion and ideas, open, happy and authentic, safe to take risk, speak up, yeah, supportive environment, feeling comfortable and safe. So yeah, I think there's a lot of alignment here in terms of the first sort of associations we have with psychological safety and mental health workplaces, and obviously that is something that's a key focus of this program as well. See, we've got quite a few responses there, 26. I like that comment as well. It is actually okay to be down and anxious. It's very much about it being okay to not be okay sometimes, and being able to have conversations around that.
We scroll some of these answers, Tom.
Sorry, what was that?
Are we able to scroll through some of these answers?
So we can see there's a pretty common trend here, how people define it. So what we want to do as well, bring the whole self there. What we want to do as well as part of this is actually look at a lot of what I'm seeing here is around psychological safety on an individual level as well, and people feeling safe and comfortable. We also want to introduce the concept of psychologically safe in the context of a workplace and the definition around that. And I can see, actually, that's good timing. I can see a comment coming through there about the organization has systems and processes for looking after mental health. And that is really what we're getting towards here as well when we talk about psychologically safe and thriving workplaces. So I just want to share a definition that sort of cornerstones this program as well. So when we talk about psychological safety in the workplace or psychologically safe workplaces, we talk about workplaces that take that systemic and integrated approach to supporting mental health positively and seek to create an environment where the mental health and well-being of all workers is prioritized and cared for. Psychologically safe and thriving workplaces move beyond awareness of mental health and simply adhering to work health and safety laws, which states requirement to prevent and manage mental health conditions where practicable. So it's really about that proactive, preventative, and early intervention approach. What can we do as an organization to create a climate and an environment that is conducive to people being able to do all those things that we just saw coming up in those comments?
I'll just need to share the definition if you don't mind. We can still see Menti.
Ah, okay. It must be indeed a bit of delay in Melbourne and Brisbane, because I've got it in front of me. Is it coming through?
I'm still just seeing your Menti screen. I think that might be the case. Maybe try unsharing and sharing again.
All right, let's see.
Yeah, that seems to be the theme.
Okay. All right. Well, let's try again. How's this? Does that come through for everyone?
It's loading, but no. Oh, here we go.
Yeah. The joys of...
A few yeses in the chat. Great. Yep, visible. All right, thanks.
All right, great. The joys of technology.
I might be running off the Brisbane ADSL1.
Yeah, as well as a classic example of how anxiety can pop up at any stage in your workday. So based on, as I just said, that definition as well, what we really also quickly want to touch base with people before we jump into the rest of the session is to just quickly, via Menti again, just get some of your quick thoughts. Can we see the Menti? Is it moving?
Yep.
Yeah, great. To get your ideas on what are some of the challenges that come with trying to create a psychologically safe, mentally healthy workplace. So if we look at all the things you just mentioned around what it means, what are the roadblocks? What are the challenges that we see around this popping up in our workplaces? Yeah, fear, resources. I'll wait for a few more to come through, but I think fear is a big one as well that we often hear in sessions that we run. It's also closely related to probably still the stigma as well around mental health and speaking up. Insecure leaders, supporting confidence, unconscious discrimination. There's some great comments coming through there.
Shame and stigma in the chat.
Yeah. Let me reopen the chat as well. But yeah, some good questions, some good comments coming through here. Not feeling believed, supervising, expecting you to work late because they do. Different emotional intelligence or resilience levels. Yeah, it is a very individual journey. Can people see as I'm scrolling as well through the comments? Yeah, brilliant. Peer pressure, denial of changes, don't know how to do it systemically.
Anchored on the past, that resonates quite strongly.
Senior management pushing the notion. not top driven, old culture. Yeah, so culturally as well. So looking at these comments as well, so these are a lot of the things that we actually, in this program as well, that we want to address and that we look at around providing participants in the program about individual skills around how to navigate through this, but also taking that systemic lens and what can we do on a systemic level to start addressing some of these things like culture. Obviously that is something we don't change overnight, but there's definitely some systemic things we can start applying there to start driving psychologically safe and thriving workplaces. But it's good to see that these challenges are pretty consistent with what we see across the board when we run these kind of sessions. So yeah, we just wanted to get a bit of context and get everybody familiar with psychological safety and how we all feel about it, as well as Menti. So probably a good time, Josh, to give a bit of background into the program.
Absolutely, Tom. So yeah, this project we're extremely excited to be part of, and it's really been possible to go from ideation to implementation thanks to the WorkWell Mental Health Improvement Fund. So the WorkWell Mental Health Improvement Fund has provided large-scale investment for workplaces to promote positive mental health and prevent mental injury. The fund targets Victorian workers identified at greatest risk of mental injury and includes young workers, ageing workers, frontline workers, and workers in industry and transition. So the goal is to create industry-wide and sustainable change, addressing the workplace factors that contribute to stress in the workplace. So our project, Applied Mental Health, is targeting higher education, with 5 Victorian universities taking part. This webinar is part of our commitment to share our learnings and help the ecosystem evolve. We're also looking towards the future of seeing how we can apply this model more broadly into other industries and other organisations based on the findings. Thank you, Tom. So why applied mental health? Do we really need another mental health platform for staff to do breathing exercises, or an online mental health training program for staff to flick and forget? Probably not. But applied mental health is not that. So I've been working in employee wellbeing for the last 12 years, including 4 years at La Trobe University. And in that time, I've seen it progress a long way, which is quite impressive since it's an industry that really is still so young. But in that time, the typical workplace wellbeing program has really gone to be far more balanced from the 90% focus on physical activity, which is where it was when I started in the space. And people, and really importantly, the leadership, by the most part, are starting to understand that the workplace plays a really big role in supporting mentally healthy people. But there is still plenty of room to grow. Right now, the majority of initiatives that are run in the mental health space are focused at the individual level and often reactive in nature, with limited organisations really focusing on the whole picture. And don't get me wrong, these initiatives are definitely valuable and an important piece of the puzzle, but that's really it. They're just one piece of the puzzle to create psychologically safe workplaces with thriving people. So a good example of that is if we look at a workplace, say your workplace offers all staff yoga at 12 o'clock for them to influence their well-being. Is that going to help an employee feel inspired and motivated to work each day if their manager doesn't acknowledge they even exist? Probably not. What if you're an individual contributor thrust into management position with 10 staff because you're so good at your role? And this is something that happens quite often in the university sector. Will you be instantly comfortable leading meaningful and sometimes difficult conversations to support your team and them succeed? What about knowing what to do if somebody discloses hardship or mental health issues? Probably not. So these scenarios play out every day and in each industry and of organisations of all sizes. So the key takeaway here is that the freshest and most colourful fruits, the most educational seminars, and the best step challenges will not make up for an organisation that doesn't address the psychological risk factors. That is what applied mental health is. It's an evidence-based systemic approach to psychological safety to support leaders in driving positive change directly in the team environment. Thank you, Tom. So our objectives over the 2 years this project is funded is to develop a scalable and evidence-based solution to build psychological safety in higher education. We are trialling a new blended learning method that will see 400 leaders across 5 Victorian universities trained in applied mental health leadership. This is delivered in the workplace, and about 2,000 of their direct reports will complete applied mental health advocacy training alongside their leader to positively impact the entire organisation. At the conclusion of this project, participating leaders and direct reports will have built valuable skills and knowledge to create, contribute and sustain a psychologically safe work environment at their respective universities. This is all completed on a socially connected and engaging digital platform. So the incentives for this are threefold. So leaders that go through the program are working towards becoming an applied mental health leader, so where they complete 4 modules. Their direct reports will also engage in the program to complete applied mental health advocacy. And then all of the work teams that complete their respective certificates, so the manager completing applied mental health leadership and their staffs repeating mental health advocacy, they will then get recognised and rewarded as a mentally healthy team. So that's the ultimate goal for everybody through the program. And this is what the journey looks like. So it all starts with leadership support and commitment. All 5 of the universities have made a commitment from their leadership to endorse the project, and we're getting great buy-in from them across the universities. To see exactly why each of the universities is participating, you can jump onto our landing page and see, and you'll see what each university says. We've also had great buy-in from some of the senior executive groups to actually participate in the program themselves, showing really visible and active commitment. The program's been built for purpose and built for the university sector. So it's been informed by feedback and input collected through the Workplace Psychological Safety Index and the focus groups, which Tom will dig into more later. Each university is also part of the overall project steering committee and has an internal working group so that we're able to get input every step along the way. So this co-design process ensures that we're going to provide a solution that is fit for purpose and reaches the objectives that we've set out. Right now, for each of the universities, we're going through the booking and registration process, rolling leaders into the program so they can work towards becoming an applied mental health leader. At this stage, they also complete a pre-program survey by our evaluation partner, Monash, to help our overall evaluation and analysis. Then we get into the fun stuff. So this is where they're going to be doing the training. So in cohorts of 15 to 20 people, they'll go through a half-day training around psychological safety leadership, and this is led by Tom. This provides the foundations of AMHL, and it gives them the first taste of the applied approach as they work through case studies in a practical way. On the completion of this training, that cohort will actually stay together for the remainder of the digital program, and they'll actually also be grouped into peer groups of 3 to add an extra level of support and knowledge sharing. That gets them into the platform itself. So this is the practical application in phase 2. Leaders work through a series of modules. So there's 4 modules, and each module contains a series of activities that they complete alongside the other 15 to 20 people in their training cohort, and they actually work through some activities with their peer group as well. It's a mixture of reflection, consultation with their peers, and application into their daily workflow. The training and the platform tools such as the library, the one-on-one meetings, the ability to give recognition, support the progress and help to really ingrain it into everything they do. It's at this stage as leaders move through module 1 and they have a fairly strong base of applied mental health, but then they'll invite their direct reports to complete applied mental health advocacy training alongside them. And then together as a whole work unit, they'll work to develop a mental health and wellbeing action plan. There's a living document for their team. So each team is individualized. And then we focus on the continuous improvement, knowing that it's not a set and forget program. Once you've completed the certificate, the goal is to continually grow it on your learning, share your experience with new leaders that come into the platform, and continually leverage off resources to make each day you lead more effective. The next steps that we want to do in this program is actually utilising data from the WIPSI to give each team themselves an individualised action plan based on psychological safety. So that's what we'll be working towards. Thank you, Tom. So a project of this size really couldn't be possible without the support of all these amazing stakeholders. So AP Psychology and Consulting Services, they're the project lead and subject matter expertise in this field. So I actually first interacted with AP Psychology probably in 2018 at La Trobe University, where Arthur, the CEO, ran leadership, psych safety leadership training. I They're just so overwhelmingly fantastic that I knew wanted to do something in that space. So my company is Dailies. We're the technology partner for this project. Monash University are running the evaluation, and specifically thanks to Sarah and Michael from the Accident Research Centre for doing all the heavy lifting on that. Project sponsor is Medibank. They're committed to innovation in mental health and wellbeing, and they have a lot of influence and connections through the higher education sector and the broader ecosystem of health and wellbeing. Also, as I mentioned, we've got 5 fantastic universities participating in this pilot. They've all been incredibly generous to be part of the steering committee and focus groups. As I mentioned, we're checking in with them fortnightly just to ensure that we get the absolute best outcomes for the project. And then, of course, WorkSafe, WorkWell have provided much more than funding for this project. They're really committed to the success of this and the success of all the other projects that they're funding. And we've really loved the collaboration that we've been able to have with them. Special thanks to Sean, who's our main contact from WorkSafe, WorkWell. And with that in mind, we'll get Tom to dig into the interesting stuff.
Great, thanks, Josh. So as Josh just mentioned, it's great to be working with all these partners. What I want to do now is just share a little bit of, I guess, more the content in terms of what we're talking about from a systemic approach, as well as what we're touching on in the training. So I'll share that with you. Before I do that, though, just another quick little Menti exercise, just engaging with all of you and getting a sense of what you believe are the current mental illness stats that are out there in Australia. Is it typically 1 in 3, 1 in 5, 1 in 8, or 1 in 10 people that we see with mental health concerns? I'll just give it a little bit of time for everybody to respond, but I can see some 1 in 3s, 1 in 5s, there's a 1 in 8 there as well. Another 1 in 3. Hopefully, most of us are indeed quite aware of this, given that you're interested in these type of sessions. But I can see indeed the majority sitting there in that 1 in 3, 1 in 5 bucket, which is about correct. I won't go through all of the stats here, but just wanted to share some of these stats for a bit further context. So what we do know is that around 1 in 5 Australians will experience a mental health condition each year. So, and that's based on diagnosed conditions. So this doesn't include people that might be struggling with their mental health, but not necessarily have been diagnosed as such. And that is actually a really big part of this program as well, because we're talking about mental health as something that we all have and want to look after, not so much about when I've got a mental health condition and the recovery journey. So this is really, as we said, about that preventative approach around this and enabling workplaces and individual leaders and individual employees about taking proactive action around this and really start driving a culture around supporting their own mental health and well-being through creating a psychologically safe environment. To that point, I do want to call out a few more stats. One, why is this program so important? Because it's estimated that still more than half of people struggling with a mental health concern actually don't put their hand up and look for support. Now, that's obviously a pretty challenging stat. And the good thing, though, is that obviously that is within our control still. If people are in the workplace and we start creating an environment that creates the safety to put my hand up that we're struggling, then we can help people start seeking support and addressing these concerns that they might be facing. Which is in line as well, actually, with 9 in 10 Australians actually reporting that it is important to them. It's just that half of us are not really convinced that we're in a mentally healthy workplace. So the awareness is there, and we've definitely been on a journey. And you could argue the silver lining of COVID being that, if anything, we can all relate a little bit more to what it's like to have feelings of anxiety or thoughts of depressive thoughts or increased levels of stress and how that may impact us. So we're really building on that awareness, but it is a journey to get from awareness to actual application and experience in the workplace. And that's a lot why we focus on that in this program. Some other stats you can see there, obviously days off, people reporting leaving a job because of poor mental health environment, as well as obviously the cost. There's different reports out there, but one KPMG report estimates the cost of poor mental health to be $12.8 billion a year. Now, interestingly, 9.9, so the vast majority of that is actually related to presenteeism. So this is the concept of people physically present, but they're not really there. They're not really being productive. They're not really engaged because they've got other things going on in their lives. Again, silver lining being that probably they're still within our reach. We can still connect, we can still reach out if we've got the skills and the confidence, if we've got the right resources to support them. So again, this is why this program and the focus as well, driven through the Workwell Mental Health Improvement Fund, is so important and valuable given the times we're navigating through at the moment. Positively, as I said, the silver lining, we did see last year that there was an increase in people reaching out to get support. So again, there is that awareness, but also very much still a long journey to go. And a stat that is not on here, but we know depression is actually the leading cause of disability worldwide, which is, you know, something that has come forward. It said will be by 2030. It's now, it already is there. So this is a reflection of that awareness and people starting to open up and talk more about it, but it's also the reality of the world we live in today, where, you know, we're very pleased that you found an hour in your day to attend this webinar, but no doubt that might even cause a little bit of stress, because now you've got other things as well for the rest of the day to focus on. And that's the world that we live in. So therefore, again, it's also really important that we all work through different strategies and approaches to look after ourselves and support our people in the workplace to do the same. So on that note, I just want to jump into how the program is designed and delivered, the systemic approach, as I mentioned. So really, we've got a dual focus here. We're looking at building leadership capability to create psychologically safe and mentally healthy workplaces. So that really looks at individual leaders in their interactions with the team. What can they do to start building the right approaches there, to have the conversations, to pick up on signs and symptoms early, and to establish that trust and environmental psychological safety. Equally, we look at a systemic approach to creating psychologically safe and mentally healthy workplaces. So that's where we look at a systemic evidence-based approach, which I'll talk to a bit more in a second, but really looking in that as well, what can leaders do there? What is within the locus of control of leaders there to start impacting the work environment for themselves as well as their teams, and really start applying that systemic approach so that it can be repeated and we can start bringing that out into the organization as well. So with regards to building leadership capability, some of the things in the training, where we start with the face-to-face training virtually, we've ran the first, I think it's 5 sessions thus far. So some of the things we look at there from a capability point of view for leaders is around what are some of the key principles of leading with psychological safety? What is actually your role and responsibility as a leader within all of this, both from a legal point of view as well as from that humanistic point of view? Understanding mental health signs and symptoms. Are we actually aware of what the signs and symptoms are? We all know that it's quite easy to spot somebody with a broken leg, but how do we spot somebody that might be struggling with their mental health? So building that capability and confidence as well. And then very important, connected to that, even if we do spot it, how do we tackle the stigma around it? How do we have a conversation? How do we start to build confidence around connecting with somebody, reaching out and seeing, hey, is there anything I can do here to support you with? How are you feeling? Where can we take this to? So those are some really important leadership capability areas that we need to address to make sure we can start driving that change. In the training as well, we use some role plays and case studies to start bringing this to life. And this is where later Josh will talk to the platform as well, where we repeat this as well. So it's really about, in the training, introducing some skills and concepts that then on the platform, people are going to be able to, in a safe space, repeat, practice, and get comfortable with. We often get the feedback that the training is really insightful and powerful. However, we also know we do training once, 3 months later, something might happen and it's like, oh, yeah, I remember the training. What was it again? And we've lost it because it's been such a long time ago. So that's another reason why we're doing it this way. Introduce the concept and then create an opportunity for people to continually apply these training skills and these capabilities, so it actually becomes part of their business as usual, as opposed to something that, oh, something has happened, now I'm going to respond to it. So that's on the capability side for building capability for leaders. On the systemic side, and I'll unpack this a bit further with a few slides after this, but we really look at some systemic frameworks about prevention, protection, and support. We look at risk and protective factors for psychological safety and mental health in the workplace. And we look at some workplace strategies that leaders can start applying in their day-to-day activities with their people in terms of how they manage their teams and their workplaces around the context of creating psychologically safe and thriving teams. So having said that, I'll just share a little bit more around those 3 frameworks that I just touched on. So prevent, protect, support. So really what we're talking about here is proactively preventing or reducing the impact of risk factors or bolster protective factors. So what we're talking about there is, if we think about a physical approach as well, to draw a comparison, we all quite familiar with that. We all know the concept where there might be, give the example of a work site where there's loud noises. We might give our people earplugs to protect their hearing. That's great. But what are we doing about the actual noise that is causing the risk in the first place? So taking the preventative action around that by looking into the organization, what are our risk factors? What is happening here that can impact on the psychological safety and well-being of our people? And what can we do on that systemic level around that, rather than just looking at giving them the individual tools and resources to hopefully navigate through it. From a protection point of view, that is about proactively protecting psychological safety and mental health by enhancing strength and capabilities, as well as facilitate early help-seeking behavior. So that starts to go into that individual level as well, though, in terms of making sure that people do have the awareness, the knowledge, and the resilience levels to navigate through challenges that are thrown at them. We all know as well that certain risk factors will always be there. So what do we put in place as well to create protective factors to make sure that people, despite those risks, feel comfortable and confident to navigate through it and look after themselves and their teams. The supporting point of view is about proactively supporting and managing existing concerns and challenges towards recovery. So again, the focus of this program really sits in that prevention space, most and foremost, but we also look at the protection and support elements around this and what leaders can do in that space and organizations more broadly. If we talk about that next level down, then we look at two things, the what and the how. So what, we talk about psychological risk factors. So this is a framework that we unpack in the training as well as then build on in the platform. But this really starts to look at, if we look at workplace psychological risk, what does that break down into? So we have on the right-hand side in the light blue, and I'm conscious that you may not be able to read it also, I'll talk to it a bit more, but we typically distinguish between individual or personal risk factors, which are related to lifestyle factors, resilience, genetics, personality, early life events, and all these things that make us uniquely us in our journey, as well as the home and work conflicts. So this might have to do with significant life events, conflicting demands between work and life, etc. So we acknowledge those and look at that. I mean, in the workplace, the reality is that we may not be able to directly impact that as much, but we can actually support people that go through that if we pick up what might be going on for them. And if we're able to actually pick up on some signs and symptoms that things are going on and direct them to the right supports. The focus of this program as well, though, is very much on the dark blue factors here. So job design, organizational, team group, because to some extent, some more than others, they are actually within our control as leaders as well. If we talk about job design, for example, resources and engagement, demand and control, flexibility, in conversation with the people, we can start to explore how people prioritize their workload, how they manage working from home or coming back into the workplace, and having those conversations around that. From an organizational point of view, obviously there is a lot that an organization can do around their culture, around the stigma, about the physical environment in terms of how we apply organizational justice, change processes, and supports that are available, and really tapping into that as well in terms of looking, okay, what do we do already? What do we need to do? And how can we as leaders contribute to that as well? And then lastly, the team group risk factors as well. This is all about the team dynamics, colleagues and managers, support, leadership, quality of interpersonal relationships. And that's where this program as well really has the ability to focus on and support leaders in creating that team group dynamic that is conducive to psychological safety and to people speaking up and supporting one another. So that's the what that we unpack. We look at all these different risk factors. What are they within the sector, and what can we do about that? And equally, what are some of the protective factors that sit on the other side of that that we can look at? The how that we provide in this program as well. 7 workplace strategies. So these are some practical strategies that have been that are evidence-based and been designed to tackle these risk factors across leadership, culture, work design, building resilience, early intervention, supporting recovery, and increasing awareness. So throughout the whole journey of AMHL, we work with our participants on this in the platform, giving them practical case studies, role plays, exercises to start applying the how to the what, so we can start using that systemic approach about how do we navigate through all of this that is happening, particularly in the university sector. Because what we have done as well is to help inform this program is actually done a risk assessment around this. So late last year, we rolled out a survey across the 5 participating universities, and we got more than 1,000 responses around this, which helped us create a risk profile. Now, this is just a visual representation of that, but what you can see here, this risk profile effectively captures those risk factors that I just spoke about before. And it starts to tell us within the university sector specifically, what are some of the strengths and what are some of the points for improvement that we can focus on that can help us as well look at what we need to tackle in this program. In addition to creating that risk profile, what we've also done is run focus groups with the participating universities and their leaders to get an understanding about what would they want to get out of a digital platform? How does it need to work? What is going to be valuable for you? What are you going to need to help you create a psychologically safe, mentally healthy workplace? So those sets of data combined helped us to develop the actual program and the content that we are delivering now through the face-to-face training and in the digital platform. So if we take that all on a bit of a timeline, just to capture it like that as well, it started back in March 2020. Then in April, we recruited our 5 university. Then there was a big bang called COVID, which stopped everything in their tracks for a little bit, but we managed to navigate through all of that. And thank you as well to the participating universities and their levels of resilience in hanging on to this project with us. We got to the point where, as I said, late last year, we collected all that valuable data to help inform the program, which we did earlier this year. And now we're very much in the live stage of the project where we're rolling out the training and where people sign a register on the platform and starting to actually commence their journey and that this will run till the end of November. And then we have the evaluation piece through Miyark as well that will actually tell us, okay, well, you said you were going to do this. How are we delivering on that? How are we tracking with this? Just to quickly share as well, before I throw back to Josh to tell a bit more about the platform, it's good to see that thus far from people that have attended the training, we've got the vast majority, 30 of the 35 that responded to an quick evaluation survey around that actually rating an 8, 9, and 10 in terms of their likelihood to recommend this to a colleague. So that shows that we're getting some good traction in terms of the content and what we're trying to achieve here, that resonates with our audiences. And that has been thus far as well very much the feedback we have received. And in many ways, I think something as well that helped us get through COVID and this not falling off the radar is the acknowledgement that mental health and psychological safety was always very important, but probably now even more so something that is very much relevant to everything that we do, even with the challenges of returning back to the workplace now, and how do we navigate through all of that. So that's good to see that in that sense, the majority of people are seeming to get some really good value out of this. And we'll be able to report back obviously at the end of the full program to see if this was a good lead indicator for the full population of participants. So just throwing back to you, Josh, to talk a bit more about the platform. I think you're on mute.
That's probably the most insightful thing I was going to say too. So yeah, what is the applied mental health approach? It's about taking the learnings and applying them directly into the work environment, as we've been mentioning. And that's why we've designed the training on 2 learning approaches. So the first is the very well-known 70-20-10 model. And we've got a really big focus on relating the activities to the leader's work environment. We're also looking to start as many conversations as possible through the Leadership Network Forum and the peer groups themselves. Now, as Todd mentioned, it is still very early days. So at the moment, we've got 90 of the 400 leaders enrolled in the platform so far. But one of the early learnings is the success of the Leadership Network, as leaders have really embraced the ability to jump in and ask questions and have conversations or answer other people's questions around leadership, around psychological safety of their peers and their broader cohort, which is really a key element of what we're trying to do, is to create that environment where people, again, psychologically safe environment, willing to openly share and then learn from each other. We also promote those connections in that communication pathway through the activities themselves, where the applied activities will actually be visible to their peer group and their broader cohort to comment on, to give feedback on, give a pat on the back and so forth, so that everybody goes through the journey together. The other element is the self-regulated learning. So it's a model that highlights that for ultimate success, people need high levels of involvement and buy-in from the very get-go in the process, and then active involvement through to application. So each module is self-paced and includes different levels of expectation setting for the exercises and reflections, so that ultimately each participant, although going through the same modules, has an individualized experience based on what's meaningful and what's impactful for them and their environment right then and there. And that's what leads us into the ecosystem. So Tom's provided a really good oversight into the model that we're using, so the 7 workplace strategies, and they're ingrained into all of the content and activities into the platform. We also tag them throughout the platform so that people are able to hone in and really focus on one of the 7 strategies that they're working towards. So the actual ecosystem itself starts at the individual leader. So each individual leader that starts the applied mental health leadership will also recruit their direct reports, and they'll be assigned into a peer group to help them with their training. That's part of the bigger training cohort that we've mentioned of 15 to 20 people, which provides that area for collaboration and learning. But then what you'll see is that that ecosystem will start to marry up with other ecosystems inside the organization, so that all leaders inside the platform will actually be seen and engaging with each other onto the leadership network. So that ultimately, quite quickly, we're able to reach the entire organization as the network effect takes place. So at the individual level, at this staff member level, it happens in a similar sort of level phase as well, as they're able to interact with not only just direct reports, but other people inside the organization as well, so that it is very ingrained throughout workplace practices. Thanks, Tom. So this is how it works in 3 sentences. It's essentially the elevator pitch. So applied mental health is delivered on an engaging, social and interactive digital platform using a blended learning approach. Leaders and their direct reports build their capability and awareness relevant to work-related psychological safety and mental health risk factors. And then these learnings are applied directly into the work environment through a series of collaborative learning modules. So what's that actually look like in application? So leaders will work through the training with Tom. So that's a cohort of 15 to 20 people that we mentioned, and that provides the foundation for them to pick up the digital solution and start working through that. So with their peer group, they'll have a series of activities to complete through the four modules. So you'll see on the left-hand side there the modules that people are working towards. So they start with a systemic approach to psychological safety in the workplace, move on to self-care and resilience, then on to understanding mental health, and then importantly, applying prevention and intervention strategies. And then the final one is a call to action. We're all in this together. It's building that team strategy. So what's happening in these modules is a range of different activities. So it starts with things such as setting out the expectations of what's going to be achieved through that module, engaging in the leadership network, so the forum with different topics and different discussion items, developing that action plan with your team, completing case studies, and then applying psychological safety practices and wellbeing practices directly into your team environment. And then it's reflecting on the progress to date. And then this is all bundled up with simple assessments in the form of quizzes. So on top of all this, participants are also utilising the platform to set meetings that matter. So we've got templates to have psychologically safe meetings there, how to have an effective one-on-one catch-up, things that people want to get better at, and also tracking their daily tasks and checking in on their own well-being. So we've got a section called My Wellbeing, which has a gratitude diary, mindfulness, and the ability to give recognition and reward for other people in the platform as well. And that all leads ultimately to the certificate. So we want as many of the leaders that go through the program to complete applied mental health and be recognised as an applied mental health leader, and as many of their direct reports as possible to complete applied mental health advocacy. So again, it's really a people-driven approach to psychological safety inside the workplace, following that systemic approach, knowing that the engagement is really a core element, and that's why we've spent a lot of time and energy into providing resources inside the platform that are engaging and activities that people want to do. So really the next steps are to just really watch the 400 leaders as they go through the platform itself, look for ways that we can optimize and improve the success rate of the platform, and then the next steps into how do we essentially continue their growth as psychologically safe leaders. Thank you, Tom. So we're jumping on to Menti again. So reflecting on what we've shared with you today, and we do understand it was a crash course in applied mental health, what is one thing that you'd like to learn more about? And this will help us with the follow-up email and also the Q&A that we're about to jump into. So just jump on the Menti.
Or in the chat as well. If people have got any questions, completing the whole course. Yes, we'll definitely look back on that. So success, how that will be measured. That's where we have the evaluation partner involved as well. So that is a third-party independent evaluation partner that they've developed a pre-program survey as well that has gone out to all participants to effectively measure where they're at point 0 in time. And then at the conclusion of the program, they'll complete that evaluation piece again. So then we can really start to have a good sense of how people have gone through this. And the other part that will play into this is that WIPSI profile that we shared before, which will actually obviously gave an initial risk profile. So obviously we also want to see if we do the WIPSI again at the end of this program, have some of these factors been impacted based on what we have done.
Tom, I might, if you're feeling up for it, cross to one of the questions that's come through the Q&A. It's a really good one, I think. So it is, what strategies are employed to allow leaders to balance their professional responsibility at the workplace and their personal nature of mental health care?
Yeah, so that is a good question, and it is always a tough one as well, because ultimately we're all people and we connect with the people we work with. So it is really around, first and foremost, as leaders, being really clear on our role and responsibility as a leader within that. And so a big part of the training and the platform as well is actually going through that process of really understanding as a leader, what am I supposed to be doing? And at what point in time also do I guide people to other supports or to potentially professional support as well to work through that. As well as obviously we've got a complete module on the program that talks about putting on your own oxygen mask first, which is a very big part of this. Key thing around this as well is that often the concept of leading by example in relation to psychological safety sometimes is I believe misunderstood still, in terms of thinking that leading by example means just showing that you're always in control, that despite all the challenges, no, I've got it all under control. When we would argue it's probably the opposite, where leading by example is actually about as well being able to show some vulnerability from time to time, and by doing that, giving your people permission to be vulnerable as well and put their hand up. So there's a lot of things around that as well that in the training as well as on the platform we work through with people to explore how they can do that in their own way, because again, we're all individuals in this. And it is about being genuine and authentic in your engagement with your people, anchored against what you know is your role and responsibility, and what supports are available to you.
Thanks, Tom. So another couple of interesting ones. So and I'll bundle these two together: how to start conversation with someone you think might struggle, and then also tools to assist others with their mental health issues. And that really digs down to the whole approach of applied mental health, knowing that information delivered to somebody in one point in time isn't really going to make a change to the whole organization. So that's why we need to bring the training program itself onto a platform, coupled with the face-to-face training, and then bring the direct reports, so your staff members, into the cycle as well, so that everybody can be part of the experience. And that's where the peer group is really important as well, because that's an opportunity throughout the training modules for leaders to actually practice working through some of those scenarios and then get feedback and input with that small group of 1 or 2 other people, particularly around doing an activity on how to have an "Are you okay" conversation and what to do if somebody isn't okay. So it's about giving people a safe place to practice these sort of scenarios and work through them with their group of peers and their cohort itself.
Yeah, and just I see another comment there about is this something that would be offered outside the higher education environment. So this is definitely very much a project that is funded through WorkWell, WorkSafe, and tailored towards the university sector. But the idea is that from the learnings as well, look, mental health and it doesn't discriminate, and psychological safety is important everywhere. So the whole idea is as well as that we develop a product or an approach here that then can be used in other industries or organizations as well, where through doing something like, for example, that workplace psychological safety index, getting a good understanding of what the risk profile is for another sector or another organization, and then providing the right approach for leaders within that organization or sector to start driving psychologically safe and thriving teams. So that allows us always to make sure we pull on the right levers depending on what the challenges, what the risk factors are within any particular organization or sector. You want to respond to the time commitment one, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so for the time commitment, obviously the first element is the face-to-face with Tom. So it's 3.5-hour training session that sets them up for the digital platform. So for the leadership training, there's 4 modules that people work through. It's delivered over 11 weeks, but it's self-paced in the essence that you start module 1 together as a cohort, and then you've got say 3 weeks for that one to work your way through when you can. We've allowing people basically to say up to an hour each week to go through and complete the entire course, so one week over the state of 11 weeks. But the factor that rates into that is we've got lots of educational content through videos, articles, and so forth that people can go in and deep dive in, or you'll have the other side of the coin where people will just jump in and go straight into the activities as well. So that's why we've safely put it as 1 hour time commitment over the 11-week program. And that's for the leaders. The direct reports is half that time essentially.
You see another good question there. How is this different from mental health first aid? And I think that is a good question. So I think mental health first aid is a very important skill set as well to have. But how this is different is really, it's looking at the other side. It's actually looking at how do we avoid, we need mental health first aid. So what are actually the things that we can do to have conversations early? How do we spot signs and symptoms? How do we create an environment that actually is open and conducive to mental health? So really, we don't need to respond necessarily to somebody who's in distress, because guess what? We've picked it up relatively early, and we're looking at, if I can draw the physical analogy one more time, but we've noticed somebody's limping. Okay, you know what? We're having a conversation then and seeing what we need to do to address that limp, as opposed to applying first aid once they've limped for a long time and now they've ruptured a ligament or they've broken a leg. It's really about that concept of making sure that we do it here and now, because oftentimes as well, obviously the recovery around that or being able to do something about that is typically easier than to try and help somebody recover from that broken leg. We can still do it. You can still recover from a broken leg. It's just a lot harder than to recover from a limp. So I would say that's the biggest difference between that mental health first aid and responding, reacting versus taking that preventative approach.
Thanks, Tom. I'll tick off. Will this be available outside the higher education environment? So that is the plan. So right now we're essentially, this pilot program with WorkWell is to essentially have proof of concept of the applied learning model that we're using for psychological safety. But then we are going to start actively looking for other industries, other organizations to pilot it, to test it in as well. So yeah, really eager for anybody that's looking at their own ecosystem that's interested, just to contact us directly, so we can start having those conversations, because ultimately that's what we're looking to do, is to make impact to the psychological safety of workplaces at scale.
I think I see another one there, bottom left. How do we help leaders to make systemic changes? So this is where those workplace strategies come in, and really looking at, for example, we talk about job design. within my role as a leader connecting with my people, what are some of the things I can do there? And so related to the workplace strategies, we've got a lot of practical suggestions, tools and tips about how to unpack that in the conversation to really understand what the challenges might be, and then also look at some practical strategies that we can start applying to make some tweaks to the job design that will help improve things. Again, highlighting as well that some of these things, it's not always about eliminating the risk factor or the challenge, because sometimes that is what it is, but then what are some of the tweaks we can make to make sure we give a bit more ownership or flexibility around that, or we build some protective factors that help dealing with some of the inherent challenges that are related to job design. So those are the things that in the platform as well, there's a whole resource library on practical tips and suggestions, as well as through case studies shared, start working through what that might look like and how you can apply that.
Yeah, I'll just quickly answer from in the chat. It's what percentage of professional versus academic are in your program? So as mentioned, we've only just really started the onboarding with 90 managers and leaders in the program. So we will be doing a follow-up session with all of the learnings, and that's where we'll pull out a lot more of the data as to exactly who's in the program, which areas of the university, I guess, what sort of successes and takeaways we have in that space there.
And yeah, definitely this program at the moment is a pilot program, but obviously, as we just said before, this is relevant not just to Victoria, but all of Australia. If I'm being very ambitious, all over the world. So it's really around the fact that, yeah, we definitely want to grow this and start reaching out to any organization or sector that believes they can get value out of this and support them in creating psychologically safe and thriving workplaces.
So what we might do, Tom, so there's obviously a lot of questions that come through, some that haven't been answered. Probably put together a bit of a FAQ after the session and also include the webinar recording and the slides for that, so that you can obviously have it on file, but also encourage you to share it with your broader workplace as well. Again, this is the purpose of this session, is to share some of these learnings.
Great. Okay. Does that mean we give people 2 minutes back of their time?
I was going to let you pick one more off, Tom, if you wanted to.
What haven't I touched on yet?
There's another one in the Q&A. Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, sure.
Some, if not most, mental health diagnoses result in lower productivity. Since productivity is so important in the workplace, how do you encourage self-care if it requires sacrificing productivity, at least in the short term?
Yeah, well, I think that final addition to that, at least in the short term, is a really relevant one in terms of if we think about people being a little bit stressed or anxious or otherwise, then you know, they're probably not as productive as they can be anyway. So then indeed in the moment it might feel like a loss of productivity, but we're really looking at you know, the long-term approach around, okay, we can have the one marshmallow now, or if you wait 10 minutes, you can have 2 marshmallows. That was a very famous experiment they did with kids around the ability to extend reward by waiting some time and effectively getting twice your return on your investment. And that's really what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about the long-term game, not the short-term. That's effectively as well the systemic approach. So it's a trade-off between potentially getting somebody to remain at a level of productivity but push them further in the red zone, and now they're going to be off work for 2 or 3 weeks, versus giving somebody a day off because they need it, and then they're going to be twice as productive as they would have been anyway.
Thank you, Tom. And that brings us straight to one thoughts again. Really want to thank everybody for your active participation in the entire session. We plan to do this again as we get more learnings throughout the program. But likewise, if you want to learn more or speak about how it might look in your organisation, please feel free to contact us. I think on the next slide there's some details. But likewise, we'll be sending out the information in the coming days. So you'll be able to just contact us directly from there.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And have a great day. Oh, got a raised hand. How do we?
From Bill Carson, I think he's just, it might be a wave.
Okay, thanks,
I'm
Bill.
not sure. Or a hand. You can always ask a question, Bill, if that's what you wanted to do.
All right, brilliant, everybody. We'll see you next time.